This is part 2 of session 84. Let's dive deep into sexual energy transfer here. Let's begin. Last episode, we ended in a totally different point of discussion, which was UFO contact and planetary changes. We talked about Jesus and other topics, personal stuff, material of the LNL research group. And we ended up in a nice point because now we're going to switch gears to sexual energy transfer, and it's going to be the whole of the discussion that we have left for this session. However, in this second part, we're going to cover a good amount of what's left, but I'm pretty sure we're going to have to go to part 3 to finish this up. So we have talked about energy transfers in general. We have talked about sexual energy transfer in the past. It's helpful if you remember and know about this. If not, I'll try to refresh on a couple of things and give you my different views on how this happens and what is the nature of reality at this point. Are we really bodies just transferring energy? Are we something else? Are we light bodies? Are we what are we then when we're transferring energy? So as much as possible in the practical aspect of this for those who engage in sexual activity, and of course want to transfer this energy and feel the energy that is transferred in sexual activity. Okay, so with that, I have no further introduction. Let's go straight into the question that we didn't cover last time. That's question 9. Don says, thank you. Going back to the previous session, it was stated that each sexual activity was a transfer before the veil. I am assuming from that you mean that there was a transfer of energy for each sexual activity before the veil, which indicates to me that a transfer doesn't take place every time. Taking the case before the veil, would you trace the flow of energy that is transferred and tell me if that was the planned activity or a planned transfer by the designing logos? Ross says, the path of energy transfer before the veiling during the sexual intercourse was that of the two entities possessed of green ray capability. The awareness of all as creator is that which opens the green energy center. Thusly, there was no possibility of blockage due to the sure knowledge of each by each that each was the creator. The transfers were weak due to the ease with which such transfers could take place between any two polarized entities during sexual intercourse. Let's set the stage for this, shall we? Oh, it's too hot. Okay, so we're talking about pre-veil conditions. If you remember, there are mind, body, spirits who are not complex, meaning they're not veiled, they know themselves as the creator. There is no illusion of separation, although the illusion of form exists. Okay, there is the illusion, the imagination of form. Just like in your imagination, it is very difficult for you to create a character and invest yourself in there. Some people can, and actually that shows a lot of imagination power. But in general, we know that everything is fine in our imagination. I'm not having emotional things or feeling I'm going to die and all these things, right? So before the veil, there was no such idea. There was no such entertainment of me as a separate self, me who is going to die, me who is separate from you. So in terms of sexual energy transfer, each sexual activity ended up in transfer. Why? Because when you know you are the creator, right? You know what you are, then any activity actually is creator to creator. Okay? And so It was just normal for us to have sexual energy transfer because every time we touch each other, we knew it was the creator. And now, Ross says that they were weak. Why were they weak if you know that you are the creator? It's a good question, right? If you know you're the creator, shouldn't you feel all the ecstasy and the intensity of the creator, touching the creator and so on? Well, it seems like it didn't. And it makes sense to me, which I'll try to explain because this conversation is going to be expanded. But for now, just know that we're talking about pre-veil conditions. There is no separation between conscious and unconscious. We knew exactly what we were, and we knew exactly what the other one was. So there was a very pale experience, Ross said, and that makes sense to me. Okay, so that's what they said, right? The path of energy transfer was always between two green ray capability. There was no possibility for blockage because there is no belief of separation. That's what it is. You cannot believe yourself to be separate. Okay? You know too much. That's the thing. You know too much. And so there is no possibility of blockage. That makes sense. For that, you need to have the idea that you are a separate being. And so lower energy center blockages, that's what we have now in post-veil third density. We have the notion that we are separate, and so with that comes a bunch of mental activity that baffles, as Ross says, the sexual energy that is meaning to be transferred, because all sexual activity is seeking that. That is the purpose of sexual activity. Okay, so the transfers were weak due to the ease with which such transfers could take place between any two polarized entities. Why? Like I said, because if you know you are the creator, well, I didn't say that yet. I've talked about this in the past, but if you know you are the creator, then there is not so much of an intensity there. It's not dearly bought that you engage in this activity with somebody else. See, because you know it's you. At the end it's you, and it's all great. So yeah, that sets the stage pretty well. Don is going to ask a question here, which is going to be met by Raw's answer. Oh no, it's not this one. Okay, let's follow. Question 10. Don says, what I was getting at more precisely is the path of energy transfer, he stopped for a second and says, when we close an electrical circuit, it's easy to follow the path of energy. It goes along the conductor. I am trying to determine whether this transfer is between the heart chakras of each entity. I am trying to trace the physical flow of the energy to try to get an idea of blockages after the veil. I may be off on a wrong track here. If I am wrong, we'll just drop it. Can you tell me something about that? So, liken it to an electrical circuit. So, Ross says, in such a drawing or schematic representation of the circuitry of two mind-body spirits or mind-body-spirit complexes, in sexual or other energy transfer, the circuit opens always at the red or base center and moves as possible through the intervening energy centers. If baffled, it will stop at orange. If not, it shall proceed to yellow. If still unbaffled, it shall proceed to green. It is well to remember, in the case of the mind-body spirit, that the chakras or energy centers could well be functioning without crystallization. That's a really important point to understand pre-veil conditions. But let's cover first the beginning of the answer. Okay, so we just want to know how the circuitry of this energy transfer works. Very simple. And Don is making that, it's making that analogy totally, right? Physical flow of energy, right. So what happens with the energy that is being transferred? First of all, let's get the schematic of the energy centers, okay? What you know as yourself is a refraction of the one light. Without sounding too metaphysical and a little far out, that white light is consciousness. No matter what tradition, what esoteric path that you take, unless they're talking about something else, that white light is consciousness, is the manifestation of the one as consciousness. Okay, and it's undifferentiated, is imperturbable, is just this one infinite light. Okay, now what happens to this light as it configures itself and as a mind, body, spirit? It doesn't matter if it's complex or not. It draws itself into 7 energy centers. You can liken them to filters. You see filters of light, different colors, if you will. It goes more complex than that because it's not just colors, but we associate them with colors because it's a refraction of white light, right? So it's a great analogy what we use in terms of light. And light is indeed the structure in which we experience the universe. So, okay, so this white light is refracted through the energy centers, but it moves in a certain direction, right? It goes beyond the violet energy center and it creates this whole bubble or aura that we call the manifested self. You, me, even a dog, anything. So all these energy centers, they're getting a flow of energy, right? And that is what's called healing or polarization or whatever. Everything is associated with this. In terms of manifestation, everything is associated with energy centers. Raising the Kundalini, you ever heard that? That's exactly what we're talking about here. So in terms of sexual energy transfer, what's happening is that energy, which wants to be transferred in the sexual activity, starts at the bottom. That's where it starts manifesting itself. That's the first step. That's the first stage of energy being manifested. Okay, the root chakra. And then it goes up to orange. Okay, and if there is some sort of blockage in orange, Ra says, it will stay there, right? The circuit opens always at the red or base center and moves as possible through the intervening energy centers, which is the next ones. And you can only find blockage at orange or yellow. That's why they say if baffled, it'll stop at orange. If not, it'll move to yellow. But if it's baffled, they don't say this, but if it's baffled, it'll stay on yellow. If not, it'll move to green. Simple. Energy will move from one energy center to the other if it finds no blockages. Eventually reaching green, which is the first transfer. And this transfer is of love, as we shall see later on. I don't know if we're going to do it in this episode, but we will see. Now, in the next part, they say, it is well to remember in the case of mind, body, spirit. Okay, we're talking about not complex, but mind, body, spirits, those who existed prior to the veil, that the chakras or energy centers, they could have been functioning without crystallization. Why is this important? I said, because it shows the quality of why prior to the veil, it was such a pale and, like I said, languid experience, simply because we all knew what we were. And it is a pallid experience for sure. So they could be functioning, right? It makes sense that they could be functioning. Let's say that post-veil, we have deficiencies because we have blockages, right? We have blockages in our lower energy centers, and we may not know or reach the point of transferring energy from higher energy centers other than green. So all these things are possible now. In the past, prior to the veil, this could have been working all of the energy centers without crystallization. Now, what's the difference of a crystallized energy center and one that is not? One that is not is very basic, is just not intense, not passionate, not strong. There is no complexity to it. There is no richness to it. And so that wasn't possible before. And I'm not saying it wasn't possible. It seems like it was common for people to be that way, right? And that's why polarization was an issue. And that's why the veil was implemented, because we could polarize faster and easier. So that makes sense to me. Again, it's a good contrast to see what was happening before the veil and what's happening now. Let's go to the next question. Question 11, Don says, in other words, they would be functioning, but it would be equivalent in electrical circuitry to having a high resistance, shall we say. Although the circuit would be complete red through green, the total quantity of energy transferred would be less. Is this correct? Ross says, we might most closely associate your query with the concept of voltage. The uncrystallized lower centers cannot deliver the higher voltage. The crystallized centers may become quite remarkable in the high voltage characteristics of the energy transfer as it reaches green ray. And indeed, as green ray is crystallized, this also applies to the higher energy centers until such energy transfers become an honestation for the creator. By the way, honestation here can be defined as a sort of adornment or grace, according to the raw context. So, all right, so let's talk about the crystallization. That's what we were talking about before the veil, right? And before the veil, like I said, see, Ra is saying that it's voltage. So you can have a very low voltage running through the whole system, and that's what it would be. You know, just a very low voltage, not much energy or intensity, right? Not much intensity or capacity of work would probably be the best way to phrase this. So yeah, we have that. We have a very low voltage running. It's almost like you have a big pipe and only a little stream running through it, right? No blockages, everything's running fine. With crystallized energy centers, then each crystallized energy center will be able to transfer more energy or move more energy, more power, more capacity of work to the next one. It'll provide that to the next one. That's what Ra is saying here. And you know, this happens obviously to all energy centers, from red to orange to yellow and so on. And this also applies to higher energy centers, right? Because we're talking mainly, like, the first thing we want to do is unblock the lower energy centers. So this is a complicated topic, because sex in our society is such a taboo conversation and so many things, right? But I'll do my best to give you my own synthesis of what I believe all of this is, and couple with some of my experience. And again, it's just a matter of you also becoming aware of what you think this might be. But in any case, that's what we have so far. There is a sort of voltage or capacity for work that is strengthened by the prior energy center as it is crystallized. But all right, let's go on to the next question. Don makes a very long question here, and yeah, we'll go through two questions here. Don says, would you please correct me on this statement then? I am guessing that what happens is that when a transfer takes place, the energy is that light energy that comes in through the feet of the entity and starts he stops and continues saying, the voltage or potential difference starts with the red energy center, and in the case of the green ray transfer, terminates at the green energy center and then must leap or flow from the green energy center of one entity to the green of the other. And then something happens to it. Could you clear up my thinking on that? Ra says, yes. Don says, would you please do that? And Ra explains, the energy transfer occurs in one releasing of the potential difference. This does not leap between green and green energy centers, but is the sharing of the energies of each from red ray upwards. In this context, it may be seen to be at its most efficient when both entities have orgasm simultaneously. So Don wants to know the mechanism, right? He's asking. He first goes into an explanation as to, okay, the light energy that comes in through the feet of the entity, the root chakra, and it goes to the next ones. The voltage or potential difference starts at red ray. In the case of green, then it terminates at the green center and leaps, like it goes. It finishes there and leaps and goes to the other. And then something happens to it. Ra clarifies this in the answer and says that the energy transfer in releasing potential difference. So we talk about male and female energies, right? That's the type of energy that is being played with here. Now what happens? The male energy will provide what Ra calls physical energy. The female energy will provide what they call vital energy, if my memory serves. Inspiration, intuition, that kind of female energy. The male energy will provide more of a physical, grounded energy, as it seems to me. So that is the potential difference that is being released in two people who transfer from green ray. Okay, that's where it starts. Then it goes upwards, but we'll cover this as we go on. That's why Ra says this does not leap between green and green energy centers, but is the sharing of the energies of each from red ray upwards. So it's a sharing of those energies and definitely the potential difference in between the two. In this context, it may be seen to be at its most efficient when both entities have orgasm simultaneously. This is something that is very beautiful. Something that we, I'll talk from my experience. Ever since I started having sex, I recognized that there was a sort of pleasure in both having an orgasm at the same time. In my experience, of course, it was a sort of training of myself to be able to hold myself until my partner would be able to release herself. And that was always something amazing for me. In fact, if any of the two finished first, to me it was over. Maybe I was a little bit too hard on myself in terms of this happening. But yeah, I just felt, and if the other one, if she couldn't get to the orgasm, then I would feel kind of I don't want to have mine either, because that's the pinnacle for me, at least. This does not mean that you need to have orgasms simultaneously, as Ra will explain. But I do want to mention a couple of things. Orgasm is that peak of experience, obviously, and these are the moments in which we have these glimpses of what being alive is. It's like a little peak. It's not just orgasm. We can have this with many things. Everything really. Drugs, alcohol, relationships, just social relationships, whatever it is, accomplishments, all these things provide these peaks, right? So we become addicted to them because as seekers, we're all seekers. We all want to be individual love, shall I say, self-love, it's what we want. So we find this in these experiences. So yeah, the orgasm is that, and of course, if it happens at the same time for both, then the experience is always beautiful, and that's something that I have been practicing for a while, and I can attest to that. It's beautiful. This is another reason why I will emphasize that when you have a partner, somebody, the more you practice this, the easier it becomes, and the more you get accustomed to this. It's like you both start knowing each other to the point that this is just common ground already. So this happened very easily to me when I started with Julie, and my whole relationship was focused on that, of course. So prior to that, I experienced other things, and yeah. In any case, let's see what else Ross says, especially because mutual or simultaneous orgasm it's not quite needed for energy transfer. So let's cover that. Ross says, however, it functions as transfer if either has the orgasm. And indeed, in the case of the physically expressed love between a mated pair, which does not have the conclusion you call orgasm, there is nonetheless a considerable amount of energy transferred due to the potential difference which has been raised. As long as both entities are aware of this potential and release its strength to each other by desire of the will in a mental or mind complex dedication. You may see this practice as being used to generate energy transfers in some of your practices of what you may call other than Christian religious distortion systems of the law of one. It's actually beautiful that they said that, and I'll go back to that. But first, let me cover what they said. In essence, if either has the orgasm, then it does happen. A transfer will happen. I remember listening to somebody who was interpreting the law of one, and she said that if one of the two doesn't have an orgasm, they polarize negatively. This was so shocking to me. I didn't expect this interpretation, but nonetheless, I knew that a lot of people would be affected by this, so I talked about this, especially in this point. I hadn't obviously covered this part, but this is where I think that mistake was made. Don't ask me how that interpretation came out, because there is nothing about negative polarization here in this whole session. And I haven't seen anything like that. It makes no sense to me. So yes, here we get the complete opposite. If one of them has an orgasm, then that's great. You know, there is energy transfer, and that's what we want. In other words, if two entities, green ray, right? They're both in green ray, no blockages. They're able to have their energy transfer, and they have sex, but one of them can't reach orgasm, but the other one does. You know, a good amount is happening there, and even in the absence, right, does not have the conclusion you call orgasm, right? In the case of the physically expressed love, there is nonetheless a considerable amount of energy transfer due to the potential difference which has been raised. So even if there is no orgasm, that will happen. It'll be okay. Even if both, okay. Even here, no negative polarization. As long as both entities are aware of this potential and release its strength to each other by desire of the will in a mental or mind complex dedication, right? So it seems to be something important for you to become aware of what you're doing. Something to keep in mind. Hopefully I'll talk about this, and maybe in the conclusions I'll dedicate a little bit of time to this. So yeah, there's no need for orgasm. If you have it, that's great. If you don't have it and the other person does it, that's awesome. If none of you have it, there is still some mutual expression of love. I love this. This is perfect and beautiful. And then they say, you may see this practice as being used to generate energy transfers in some of your practices of what you call other than Christian religious distortion systems of the law of one. So basically, other than Christian practices in terms of sex, and I am not fully aware of all the practices or suggestions that the church or Christianity tries to provoke in people. I'm only aware, probably aware of the most undesirable interpretation of sex that they have, which is that you can only have sex in some religions. They tell you that you should only have sex if you want to have a baby, as if, sex is just for reproduction. So there is no love in there. You see, there is no merging of two people or the creator. There's none of that. You're animals. You just get there to make babies, which is kind of deploring for women too, right? The woman's job is just to pump babies. That's terrible. There is the other thing that I love here, or what I love the most actually, is that they call systems of the law of one anything that are systems, spiritual systems. They are all going to the law of one. Another reason to call this the perennial philosophy. The knowledge of self as the creator is the highest knowledge, and that is the law of one. There is only one being, and that is you. If you can get to that, everything resolves. There is no issue. There is only enjoyment. There is bliss. So these are things that I cover in my direct path teachings. So links in the description if you're not aware, because that's what the law of one did to me, as well as non-duality. It brought me to my own investigation of knowing myself, and being able to teach this to others is just a pleasure, and I'll keep doing it until this physical chemical complex dissolves. But let's dissolve this question and let's go to the next one. Question 14, Don says, would you give me an example of that last statement? That would be the other than religious, Christian religious traditions. Ron says, we preface this example with the reminder that each system is quite distorted and its teachings always have lost. However, one such system is that called the Tantric Yoga. So I don't have much to add here because I'm not fully aware of all the practices in Tantric Yoga, but I can tell you a couple of things which are, of course, important for the overall theme of sexual energy transfer, which, as it seems, I will expand more in the conclusion. In Tantric Yoga, we are concerned with exploring the feelings of the world. It's a physical thing. It's experiencing, your feelings, your touch, your sensations, all of this, in the light of pure consciousness, not as a body, as an animal, right? That's a lower energy centers. You're stuck there. In Tantric practices, you are aware of yourself as that which knows your experience, the creator. You know yourself as the knowing aspect of experience. And it's very different to explore sexuality from this point as it is from the animal. I have obviously explored so much the animal part that's what my sexuality was for all my life. And this gradually started changing as I became more aware of what my reality is. Like, who is the one feeling this? Is it the body, this animal being that I think I am? Or is it something else? What is it inside me that is experiencing this? And how does it feel? Is there a difference? Yes, there is. And that's what I'll talk about later. But yes, that is what we are concerned with in Tantric yoga, or just tantric practices in general. But of course, we associate them with yoga because that's where it came from. So yeah, that's something that I don't think we have much knowledge. Like Ra says here, each system is quite distorted, and its teaching always half lost. It's very difficult to transmit this, very difficult, because whenever you do it, you expose it to the possibility of distortions, interpretations. Let me give you an example of this that I have talked about in the past. In Chinese philosophy, this may be a mixture of Taoism and Confucianism. I'm not quite sure. It could be just Taoism. But it was said that the law should not be written, because when it was written, it was subject to interpretation. That makes sense. If you're going to interpret it, then your interpretation is going to be different than mine. And who is right? We don't know. So it shouldn't be written. However, we have nothing else but transmission of knowledge through scriptures and writing. Or the best one is direct transmission, which is what Zen is concerned with. So we don't have that. That's not part of our system. If you have looked around since you were born, you have been reading, right? Not since you were born, but you get the idea. This whole world is it's all about scriptures and books and history and registration keeping and all of this. And it's so vague. It's not really the true essence of what happened. If you're familiar with YouTube, you may know somebody called CGP Grey. Last night I watched one of his videos with my son, and I thought it was fantastic because it relates to this. He's a nerd in terms of getting a topic and really going at it. He does all these researches and reads books and books and books, and he was talking about how ridiculous it was to try to talk about something where all the knowledge, things, and he's talking about military stuff and history and things that we think are recorded, but they're terribly recorded. There are accounts from people and they don't match, they're controversial, they contradict each other. It's a whole mess. And so this system of being reliant on written stuff, it's not good. So yeah, it's difficult. But tantric yoga, again, that's something that can be transmitted directly if possible. But in the end, we just need to explore it. Let me not keep talking about this and move on to the next question. Question 15, Don says, considering individual A, in individual B, if individual A experiences the orgasm, is the energy then transferred to individual B in a greater amount? Is that correct? Ross says, your query is incomplete. Please restate. What I'm trying to determine, says Don in question 16, is the direction of energy transfer as a function of orgasm. Which entity gets the transferred energy? I know it's a dumb question, but I want to be sure I have it cleared up. Ross says, if both entities are well polarized and vibrating in green ray love, any orgasm shall offer equal energy to both. So, once again, this is, I think Ra covered this, but Don didn't get it, I suppose. But Don is basically asking, I think what he wanted to know is the direction of how this energy moves, right? So if one has the orgasm and the other one doesn't, what happens to the energy? And Ra is restating basically that if one has the orgasm, energy is already transferred anyways. This is assuming that both, as Ra says, both entities are well polarized and vibrating in green ray love. You see, so it doesn't matter who has the orgasm, they will transfer energy. So there's that. Simple. There's not much to see here. Let's go to the next question. Don says, question 17, I see. Before the veil, can you describe any other physical difference that we haven't talked about yet with respect to the sexual energy transfer or relationships or anything prior to veiling? So, really good question here. Before the veil, can you describe any other physical difference with respect to sexual energy transfers or relationships? Let's see. Ross says, perhaps the most critical difference of the veiling before and after was that before, the mind, body, and spirit were veiled, entities were aware that each energy transfer, and indeed very nearly all that proceeds from any intercourse, social or sexual, between two entities, has its character and substance in time-space rather than space-time. We will continue talking about this, but let me pause here. This is a crucial, very important, so please pay attention to this if you are swimming the mystical waters of the self, the creation as one. Please pay attention to this. The most critical difference of the veiling before and after is that all intercourse, social or sexual, between two entities has its character and substance in time-space rather than space-time. We think this is post-veiling, of course, before the mind, body, spirit were veiled, entities were aware. Okay, so it's a little confusing the way it's rephrased. So let me just explain it and we can reread it so it makes sense. So what is going on? What we have is there is a belief, right? We humans have a belief that we are just this. Okay, I am this body and mind and I'm going to die, so I need to do things and so on. The mystical path shows you that there is no you to die. What you are is the knowing aspect of reality. You are pure consciousness. If you believe yourself to be anything than that, then all sorts of trouble may arise, and of course, the drama of life unfolds. Fair enough. But you, my friend, I assume, are in the path of knowing yourself and exploring this reality from unity consciousness, shall we say. So, I'm going to throw at you what's really happening. You see, there is no space-time per se. Time-space is a little bit more real than space-time. Actually, none of them truly exist, but in terms of manifestation, time-space is more real, or it is closer to reality. Space-time is just a conceivable perception of separation, of space, yeah? 3 dimensions of space. That's what space-time is. Now, what happens when we are stuck in space-time? Well, the vast majority of humanity, 8 billion people at this point, possibly, the vast majority of them are thinking that this is it, this is my body, this is me. Even if they believe in reincarnation, they still believe in some sort of something going back and forth, and that is me. I still associate myself with something that is moving, that is changing. You're still stuck with some sort of ego. Now, the truth is that ultimately, you're neither of these things. You're not the body, you're not a soul, you're not a mind, you're none of this. These are all elements for creation to be manifested. Yes? So, you becoming aware of this is liberation. Is liberation to know that this which is being experienced by the same self that is everywhere, the same creator. There are no 2 creators. You're not a creator and I am a creator. We are both the same creator. That makes sense. So, we do believe that we are made out of space-time. And time-space is just something that is there, Even in metaphysics or spirituality, it is something, oh, time space is different than space time. And no, they're not. They're one and the same thing. And it's consciousness. It's just pure consciousness. Forget the divisions. We get stuck. You see, when we get too intellectual, we get stuck. We get stuck with the concepts and the divisions and the categories, and I am this and you are that and we are going to this and blah, blah, blah. Release all of that if you want to be liberated. If not, you're still attached to something, and that won't serve you well in your mystical path. Or at least that's just my suggestion. Why? Because I was stuck in there. I remember being stuck in metaphysical concepts and all sort of spiritual beliefs and that kind of thing, trying to make my way through the mystical path, which is it's not a difficult one. It's just that it's so simple that we obviate it because we're so stuck with the mind. We have to figure this out. All right, so let's reread it and see what Ra said. They said, perhaps the most critical difference of the veiling before and after was that before the mind, body, spirits were veiled, entities were aware that each energy transfer has its character and substance in time-space rather than space-time. So they knew that this transfer was in time-space, not in space-time, right? And not just a sexual one, but social, they say. So what else do they say? They finish up saying the energies transferred during the sexual activity are not, properly speaking, of space-time. There is a great component of what you may call metaphysical energy transfer. Indeed, the body complex as a whole is greatly misunderstood due to the post-veiling assumption that the physical manifestation called the body is subject only to physical stimuli. This is emphatically not so. Okay, so what have I said before? Once again, this is also because we grew up and we're still under the influence of the material universe. Even within religion, there is an idea of material universe. You are simply here. It's such a watered down version of spirituality, but that's what we have as religion. Not all of them, I have to say. They all have different distortions, but in essence, it's always you are this thing, this body that is simply living and having an experience here, but you will be judged and so on. So it doesn't matter. Even in religion, there is still some of this, but in general, because of our materialistic view of the universe, we believe that we are just this body, right? So what do they say? The energies transferred during the sexual activity are not of space-time, properly speaking, they say. They're not of space-time. It's not happening here. It's not the physical. It's obviously in time-space. There is a great component of metaphysical energy being transferred. Indeed, the body complex as a whole is greatly misunderstood due to the post-veiling assumption that the physical manifestation called the body is subject only to physical stimuli. So we're barely beginning to see the effects of the mind in the body recently because we thought that everything was the body. Or we thought that, I think that was even closer when we thought that there were spirits that were possessing us. That might have been closer than what we think now. It's just the body. The mind has a great deal of influence, if not all the influence, depending on how much you believe yourself to be a body, on what the body is. I think that's very important. The body complex as a whole is greatly misunderstood due to the post-veiling assumption that the body's only subject to physical stimuli. And this is emphatically not so. It's very important to keep this in mind because our own convictions, we treat ourselves to be a body. Although we intellectually, we satisfy ourselves with the story of spirituality or metaphysics, and I'm being a little bit, what's the word that I want to use? I'm being a little bit, I don't know what the word is. With asperity, I may say. Yes, I think I'm talking with a bit of asperity here to say that we massage our intellects, our minds a lot with all of this information and say, wow, yeah, this is great, this is awesome, this is true. But how much do we apply this? How to apply this is the important part. I remember massaging myself with all this information, but still feeling frustrated with life, frustrated with my experience, because I said, how come I believe all of this stuff? And I find it fascinating and I find it to be true, but I can't experience it. Well, I said the right word. I believe it. I don't know it. So going from belief to knowing, it's the biggest step. So yeah, that's one important point of this process. Let's see if we can cover one more question. How many do we have? We have another 20 slides or so. One more question. Don says, after the veil, in our particular case now, we have in the circuitry of which we were speaking, what you would call a blockage that first occurs in orange ray. Could you describe what occurs with the first blockage and what its effects are on each of the entities, assuming that one blocks and the other does not, or if both are blocked? Ross says, this material has been covered previously. If both entities are blocked, both will have an increased hunger for the same activity, seeking to unblock the baffled flow of energy. If one entity is blocked and the other vibrates in love, the entity baffled will hunger still, but have a tendency to attempt to continue the procedure of sating the increasing hunger with the one vibrating green ray due to an impression that this entity might prove helpful in this endeavor. The green ray active individual shall polarize slightly in the direction of service to others, but have only the energy with which it began. Very important refresher here actually for this conversation on sexual energy transfer. So let's see what they were saying. All right, so Don wanted to know, what did he want to know? I have my last sips. This is a great mug. It's been over an hour since I brewed this tea and it's still warm. I love it. Anyhow, after the veil, in our particular case now, the circuitry we call blockage first occurs in orange ray. Could you describe what occurs with the first blockage and what its effects are on each of the entities? So yeah, I guess Don didn't remember that they talked about this, but this is the effect of increased hunger for sex, something that I myself am very, very much familiar with, because I can see my blockages, my own blockages, and the effects of that, which is to continue to seek sex. So that's what's happening. Okay, Ra covered this before, and so they say this was in session 30 something, I think. So you can go watch that session if you want. All right, what do they say here? 26 and 32. That was the big conversation on sexual energy transfer. If you're going to rewatch that, go to session 26, question 38. It's the last question, if I remember correctly, which in the books, if you have the 5 books or the original books, you won't find it, but in session 32, I think, because they moved that to leave session 26. It was the last question and they talked about sexual energy transfer, and so they decided not to put it in session 26. So they just put it in session 32 in the books. But if you have the raw contact, then you will find it in session 26. And because I cover the raw contact, you can find it in my session of session 26, second part or third part. I don't know how many parts I did there. Okay, so yeah, go look for that if you want more information on sexual energy transfer. For now, rewatch it, re-listen to it, whatever you want to do. or not. And here Ra is restating, right? If both entities are blocked, so we have two people who have blockages and they engage in sex, then there's going to be an increased hunger for the same activity, because sex does provide that. It gives you the taste of what green ray really is, and so you're looking for that. You're seeking to unblock the baffled flow of energy. That's very, very cool the way they say it. Now they say if one entity is blocked and the other one vibrates in love, which means green ray energy, the entity baffled, the entity blocked, will hunger still, but have a tendency to attempt to continue the procedure of sating the increased hunger with the one vibrating green ray. So it seems like you get attached to somebody who is loving. So the one that is blocked will want to be attached to the one who provides that love. That makes sense, because the one blocked doesn't know really what it's looking for, but it sees it on the other person, so it feels like it's going to, right? That's what they say. They're under the impression that this entity, the one vibrating in green ray, might prove helpful in this endeavor of sating that hunger. The green ray active individual shall polarize slightly. So the other person who is vibrating in green ray love will polarize slightly in the direction of service to others, but have only the energy with which it began. So it won't increase its energy. I don't know if that means that it won't crystallize itself, but it will definitely polarize to some degree. So that's what we have when we have a situation of somebody being blocked or both being blocked. I want to assume that if both are blocked, then they don't necessarily need to seek each other, because they don't find that light of love in the other person. And so yeah, I feel like that's what happens when two people are blocked. Now, I won't dare to say who is blocked and who's not. I think we should all think of ourselves first. I know it's easy to say, oh, that's what my boyfriend or girlfriend, right, they were blocked and they had issues. I don't know about the others. I only know about me. Where am I blocking my energy centers? And that's a topic for another day. But yeah, we have come to the end of this episode because we have a very long question to cover next. And right, yeah, no, we have a short and then a long question and more. So we're gonna finish this in part 3. It might be a shorter session or episode. Conclusions. Well, I promise over and over again that I will talk about this view of reality from unity consciousness, which is what everything is being shown here in this session in terms of sexual energy transfer, especially the interaction of bodies. And I'm glad we touch on that part where they speak of tantric yoga. And talking about sex, this is to experience yourself as the knowing aspect of reality and see how the body reacts. Now, in tantric meditations, you would see that you are exploring the feeling of having a body, of having sensations in general. You see? So that's just tantric meditation. You know, you become aware, you're paying attention to the body. You're seeing it not as a sort of something that needs to be preserved because it's in danger, but from the other side to say that, oh, this body is being manifested from myself, from the singularity that I am. And what does it do? It touches, it senses, it smells, and you explore all these things from that point of view. That is not just like eating food or smelling things. I mean, that's just, you're lost in form there. You want to take a step back first. right? So this is why we go, if I could describe it, the way I would prefer to do it is go the Vedantic way, right? You would go inside first. You need to go inside. You need to find out first what you really are. You're not a body, you're not a mind, you're not an ego. First, find out who you truly are. And then from there is that you will explore the body. Now, what happens here? When you do this, you start to see that the aware principle that you are is what's exploring anything. And so, when you explore sexuality from this way, something different happens. You see, it's not the animal taking over and saying, I need to have sex. And I don't know why. I simply want to. It's the self who is exploring this. You see, you are moving away from the ego, from this contracted self, limited and separate, and residing more and more from this. This is my dream. I am enjoying this. This is happening. I don't have control over anything. This is just the movement of me, of consciousness. There are so many things that can be explored here, not just sex, but anything. And this is why tantric yoga or tantric meditative states are so satisfying, because you are completely aware of what you're doing. You know that you are doing it. You know that it's happening. And you know that what you're sensing is yourself. Everything that you're sensing is yourself. So try to take that into sexuality, your sexuality, and that's what they were talking about here. That is what I consider to be something of importance, especially to transcend our sexuality to a different level, in which you can enjoy it from that perspective. Before I finish, I'll give you one tip, one thing, if you can get your couple to do this with you. If you are adept at reaching orgasm at the same time, do this. I don't know if you've done it. If you haven't, you're missing a lot. As you're both having the orgasm, look at each other in the eyes and don't blink. Just fall yourself into the gaze of the other. Thank me later. You can leave me a comment if you want. Such a great experience. So do it, and hopefully it'll happen. I have nothing else to say but to remind you, as usual, please check the description for my links and what I do, how you can get involved with me if you're interested in this mystical path, which I am so gratefully able to teach to others and guide in this process. We'll need another session, like I said, or another episode to finish this. There are not many more questions, but we have a long question that requires some time. So with nothing else to say, I thank you as always for watching, listening, wherever you were at. Have a nice day, have a nice night, be well, and I'll see you in part 3 of session 84.